Welcome to Your Power, a podcast brought to you by Soul Centered. Soul Centered is a spiritual center for anyone seeking meaning, healing, and purpose in the afternoon of life and midlife and beyond. And we provide healing and guidance services to anyone seeking to make the shift from a self-centered to a soul-centered life at midlife and beyond. I'm Ariela. I am your healer and co-founder of Soul Centered. And
I am Baruch Levi, also known as B. I am your guide through the afternoon of life. We co-founded Soul Centered to bring messages like this to you all. And we're now doing it for those who are listening on podcast. Obviously, you can hear us, but what you can't see is we're videoing for the first time. So we're doing both.
Testing it out,
multitasking. So thank you for pioneering and piloting this with us and bearing with us, because obviously a lot of learning curve going on here.
Absolutely. But we're excited to be here. We're just seeing how this works today.
So maybe, should I tell them a little bit about the afternoon of life? And
Yeah.
we'll take us into the topic.
That's great.
Afternoon of life, pretty straightforward, though sometimes not exactly clear when it begins. It's the second half of life. Dr. Carl Jung, the founder of this idea of psychotherapy in the world we know it's today and the way we know it today, talks about the morning of life and the afternoon of life. And the morning of life, roughly till 40, that's probably a good dividing point.
It is.
Not a hard and fast rule, but different goals, different rules in the morning of life versus the afternoon of life. And now that we're in the afternoon of life, we wanted to devote our time, our attention, our energy to figuring out what is the afternoon of life and rewriting the goals and creating new rules so we can live differently in the second half of life.
Exactly. And the challenge that we've experienced in our own lives, for sure, just entering midlife and guiding countless clients in their lives, is that, as Jung says, we aren't prepared for the afternoon of life. We can't live in the afternoon of life according to the life's morning's rules, right? The morning of life is that early life, and we can't live like that.
You can try.
We've tried.
It doesn't work well. Don't encourage
No, it doesn't work. As Carl Jung says, for what was great in the morning will be little in the afternoon. And what in the morning was true, in the afternoon will only become a lie. So this is really why we created Soul Centered, because we needed a place to land in the afternoon of life. And we've always had this idea of creating a spiritual center. And it makes sense because we know what tools we can offer because we've been through it. And that's why we created the Own Your Power podcast, for new rules, new goals, new tools in the afternoon of life.
So let's get ready to own your power.
Let's go.
All right. Today's topic: anxiety. I know this is probably only theoretical to you. It's personal to me. It's certainly personal to the people we guide. I mean, what percentage of our clients are dealing with anxiety?
I would say the entire world is filled with anxiety
100%.
right now. Absolutely.
Somebody said to me that they don't have anxiety. And I said, then you're not human, right? Because all human beings have anxiety. It's just part of the deal, of the game. And we want to explore anxiety, take it head on. So that's today's podcast, calling it Facing and Embracing Anxiety as a Pathway to Healing. We're going to talk about it, then we're going to give you practical tools, because although we are both guides, therapists, healers, we also believe the coaching world has a lot to offer in regards to practical ways to implement these ideas in your life.
Exactly. So I think the first thing we talk about is that whether or not you are a person that has anxiety, you can't help but to live in the world of anxiety right now with COVID, politics, social unrest, and the economy. It's just a recipe. 2020, as we've talked about before with our clients and also on these videos, is a recipe for anxiety. So whether or not, I don't consider you a super anxious person. I think you might consider me somewhat anxious.
We'll get into that, Enneagram types.
However, there are these moments like 2020 when you really have to use your tools to calm down your nervous system in order to make really good choices. So we're going to get into that.
And, that's just what's happening in the world right now. Anxiety of just daily living, that never stopped. That doesn't change. It was the same in 2019, and it'll be the same in 2021.
Absolutely.
Some of our circumstances are radically different. Some are radically the same and will always be that way. And so we need these tools during the good times, during the bad times, everything in between. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So anxiety, let's define it, I guess, before we get into it. How do we define it?
So actually, I looked up the definition of what anxiety is in the dictionary. So the dictionary defines anxiety as a strong desire or concern to do something or for something to happen. So it's this worry. I will take that a step further and say that there's a fear or worry about something that has happened or something that will happen. Most of anxiety, and you've probably found this in working with people, is that most of anxiety is that we're not sitting in the present moment. We're either terrified of, will we be in lockdown in a week, in 2 weeks, post-Thanksgiving, or we're terrified because we were in lockdown and that caused us so much stress.
So what I hear you saying is anxiety derives from the mind, from our brain, right? And there are different thinking centers. There's the mind or brain center, there's the feeling heart center, and then there's the instinctual body kind of gut, right. Heart, mind. And you don't feel anxiety emanating from your gut, right? We have other issues with body and whatever, but anxiety really is a mental state.
I disagree.
Here we go. Let the games begin. I am not saying that it doesn't have consequences and manifest in other areas, but
you think it stems from the mind?
By definition, anxiety is a thinking origin, and it has consequences because, for instance, an ulcer. What is an ulcer? An ulcer is me thinking anxious thoughts, then translating that energy into my body to create a hole in my stomach. So the consequence is far beyond the brain,
right.
But the origins of it are the brain. Probably animals don't have anxiety at the deepest level. Here we go. We're going to argue already.
So we meet in the soul, but sometimes we don't get quite there. So I agree with you. I think originally anxiety originates in the mind because something is making you scared. Right? Now, the interesting thing is that your body is so much, we think our bodies and our minds are so different, but our body is so much a part of our mind. So if you've had something that's happened to you before and you feel that anxiety, like your mind remembers how scared it was, your body's going to go into automatic fight or flight mode. So that's why I argued a little bit in the beginning, because which comes first, the chicken or the egg? Yes, I think it stems possibly from the mind, but the body is just like right there with it, ready to react.
But that's a good point. The anxiety isn't bad. It's not good. It's just energy. And that's really an important piece. If you feel this kind of onslaught of fear, right, that's built into our wiring from 50,000 years of survival, fight, freeze, flight.
Right.
And so there's something to learn from that. Now, when we take that, when we don't know how to release that, the dinosaur isn't out there anymore, but my body still holds on to it. And then I start translating it into my mind. And then my mind starts running with it and playing out all these worst case scenarios. Now it's energy run amok.
Yes, very true. And I think that I see anxiety as, if you think of a child who has a tantrum and that you see that they're out of control. So anxiety to me is a little child who is asking for our attention. Yes, our body reacts, our adrenaline kicks in, our cortisol levels, they're skyrocketing. And we feel, when you're that anxious, you really feel out of control. And if you've had experience with anxiety, your body is ready for it. So that ulcer, I know when I feel anxiety, it may start in my head, but my stomach is the first thing that goes right into anxiety. It's like, well, I remember how this is. And so anxiety is like a little child who has arrived in your space. And it hasn't come, so this is the key. It hasn't come to ruin us. It's come it has a message.
For attention.
Right. It's not come to hurt us. It wants to be acknowledged and it wants a home. And we're going to get into how to handle it. But I think the first step is to say, okay, anxiety comes from the mind, the body reacts, and it's like a little child. We're so scared of anxiety. I know when I feel it, it's hard. But if we can imagine our anxiety as a child, then we can say all children need attention.
So, here's a misunderstanding I hear all the time in talking about what's good and what's bad. People say all the time, children are good or babies are good. Babies are not good. They're not bad. They're primal. They're surviving, right? So when they're crying when they don't get their needs met, and it's about going beyond our survival, right? And that's what a child does. You start to teach them how to develop, how to cultivate that, how to take that fear of I'm not going to get fed or my diaper needs changing, to start communicating, understanding where that's coming from, how do you process it, how do you deal with it, and harness that energy. But that's all it is. It's energy. It's not good. It's not bad. I just hear over and over again from my clients the dark emotions, anxiety, fear, doubt, shame, depression. These are bad. And you see it a lot in the New Age world. We talk about this a lot, where there's this kind of, well, not kind of, it's called spiritual bypass. We want to get past the dark emotions to get to the light emotions. And we talk about a lot that it's a mistake, because they're all there to teach us and to call out to us and to harness the energy to do something with it.
I mean, I like what you said, because really anxiety is just energy. Anxiety is energy, and we don't like it because we'd rather feel joy. We'd rather feel grace and peace and ease. But if you think of anxiety as one of those shadow feelings, shadow emotions, then, and if you see it as a small child that needs attention, then the shadow is ultimately a storage house for gifts. Because you can learn. I mean, I'm the first one to say that I definitely struggle with anxiety. And I have learned invaluable gifts from healing and going through. I mean, it's not, it's always with me, but harnessing and listening to that anxiety.
And then we'll get into right now in a second, Own Your Power. We'll talk more about that. But I actually want anxiety, right? If the dinosaur is coming, and you can now translate the dinosaur into 5 million different real life situations. Mm-hmm. I don't want to feel kumbaya, right? I want, my body is my mind is telling me, prepare, right? Or you will die, you will become extinct. And so there's a message in that. And I want to learn how to use it, not be used by it.
Right.
And to me, that's the difference.
Totally. And that's what Own Your Power, which we will talk about, is all about. That are you going to let anxiety take over you? Now, I think there is a difference between, we can talk a little bit about the way that our behavior is in anxiety and how some people react to it. But are you going to let it overtake you, or are you going to harness it? It's like I think of, the lion. Are you going to let that lion overpower you and eat you, or are you going to tame the lion?
And are you going to react like a lion, right? The fight. That doesn't mean just because you're going to go fight the dinosaur or the lion or the problem that's in front of you, that also is just a form of reaction. Dr. Viktor Frankl, we talk about a lot, says between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom and our growth. Not reacting, learning how to respond. But to do that, we need to create the space, which probably takes us into Own Your Power tool number 1.
Absolutely. Making time.
We have 7 steps in Own Your Power. We'll tell you more about the program that we're offering to you all complimentary afterwards. But right now, these are the 7 steps of Own Your Power.
So let's just touch base on that, because that's where we are right now. So making time and space, especially right now when, we have 3 out of 4 children at home, homeschooling, online learning. And it's now is more important than ever to carve out space in your life for yourself. I talked yesterday to a large group of women, and we talked about how challenging that is as a mom, as a working mom, and how do you carve out space and time? So if anxiety is something that we want to deal with and to not let it control us, then we have to have the space and cultivate it. And so that may be 5 minutes. It may be, if you have more time, it may be more than that. But making space and time
to 5 minutes to breathe.
We have a you can't see it. We have a breathe sign behind us. But just breathing. I'm known to close the door, the bathroom door, the closet door, to just take 5 deep breaths in the middle of chaos, in the middle of anxiety, using your tools.
So Own Your Power, step 1, make Om. Get it? Om, make time, and space. It was a stretch to find the first one, but meditate, mindfulness, they all make sense.
Yes.
But making time and space, and part of it is also just reframing what you're doing. We talk about it every time, and we'll keep talking about it every time, shifting from selfish to self-centered, saying that it isn't selfish to be doing this work, to be grappling with your anxiety, going to a therapist, a healer, to work through some of the anxiety and learn how to harness it. It's self-centering, because when you're anxious, you're not at your center,
Right.
You're off balance. And if so many people I work with define themselves as here for service, taking care of, tending to their family, their community, their world, their causes, but they're off center and it's not sustainable. They're losing themselves in the process. They're being depleted in the process. And so making time, making space, putting yourself at the center is not selfish. And that's a starting point.
Exactly. I mean, I call it aligning with your truth. When you're running around your center and you're not in it, then you're not aligned with your highest truth. And from that place, you can't make decisions. So we often, when we're not taking space and time for ourselves, we're not aligned in our highest truth. We're not aligned in the soul. And we're making impulsive decisions. And also what we're doing is that we're running. You know, we've done podcasts before or videos, but we could do a whole video on busyness. Because when we are not in the soul, you're spending too much money, you're eating too much food, you're drinking too much alcohol, and you're watching too much Netflix.
Or you're working too hard.
Or you're working too hard.
You know, there's positive versions of that too. I call it the void dance, avoidance, a dance around the void. And you just keep dancing and dancing and dancing around the void, but you're avoiding what's at the center, because anxiety it's self-perpetuating, right? It just keeps going and going and going, because that's what energy does until you harness it, release it, channel it. And that's what we begin with on step one, making time and space.
Yeah. So I think also we should talk about this idea of how we all react to anxiety, but how we can harness it depending on how you handle your anxiety. We've kind of looked at anxiety as mind types versus body types. And we're going to talk about how meditation, our next oming your power, can really help with both types of people. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about people who are in their mind, who really feel anxiety in their mind, and how to handle, or how, some tools that we could help all of us with about when you feel like you're in your mind. So when you feel like you're in your mind and you're anxious, your thoughts are on speed dial, right? Your thoughts are running and running and running. So instead of running with it, the avoid dance, instead of going away from the anxiety, it's facing the mind, but the mind needs something more to calm itself down. So meditation is a really great way when you're dealing with someone who's just really in their mind and can't get out of their mind. Typical type A people, right? So meditation is often a practice that can really help you deepen your connection to your body so that your body can help you calm down.
Yeah. So thinking about meditation, not as this high bar, I can't meditate, right? It's just not true. People say to me all the time, I can't meditate. You can't breathe? I mean, breathing and paying attention to your breath, coming off of kind of an autonomic reaction, that's just what I'm doing to survive, to I'm just going to pay attention to my breath, is a form of meditation. And it's something you've done 1,000 times, 1 billion times, to realize I got to catch my breath. Right? I am out of breath. Back to step one, making time and space. Mm-hmm. I'm just rushing. The first thing you do is you stop. Right? I've been writing a lot about program I'm putting together, and it's about being lost in the wilderness. If you've ever gone camping or hiking and you've gone up to the woods and you're by yourself and you didn't think to take a compass and your phone doesn't work out there and you think, oh, no problem, I'll find my way. And then all of a sudden you forget where you are and it starts spinning and you start rushing. Just, I'm going to go this way, I'm going to go that way. And you're making it worse and worse and worse. Right. What's the first thing you do? You just stop and you catch your breath. And that is a form of meditation.
Absolutely. And I would say then one of the next steps is that you cultivate silence, because what happens when you stop is that your body has a chance to catch up. Your nervous system can calm down. If we are not meant to be in fight or flight forever, And I would say the majority of our society lives in that chronic stress. We are supposed to, when we're chased by the lion, which I consider anxiety, we are supposed to amp up. We are supposed to get our cortisol up. But if we do not take that time to meditate, which I don't even like that word because there's so many people that say they can't do it. When we take that time to stop and become silent, then we can stop our nervous system and it helps our body.
It's true. In Kabbalah, we call it hit bodedut, which is a better word. I know I got to translate it, but it means it's a self-reflective verb, and it means to make yourself alone, right? Just to find some quietude, create that space where it's just quiet and you can just be present,
right?
And pay and listening. I mean, you were talking a lot about listening, being able to listen. Well, what's happening here? What am I feeling? I didn't even know my heart was pounding this hard. I didn't realize I was sweating. And so you just start listening to what is, as opposed to, because isn't that really a part of anxiety? It's not listening to what is, it's what could be, should be, was, will
it's
be.
Your mind.
It's your mind. And so you just start listening. And it'll take us into the next one of Om, mindful, paying attention to what is.
Right. And we think about mindfulness. Mindfulness is a little different than meditation. Meditation is a leave taking. It's finding that silent space and removing yourself from the actual, spinning.
That's a good point.
Right? Yeah. I mean, mindfulness is present moment awareness. Sitting in your dizziness, your anxiety, your tizzy of anxiety. So if you are a runner, the avoid dancer, that runs away from the present moment, then you probably have anxiety. So the present moment is the ability to find mindfulness. And mindfulness is simply sitting with what is. And if you have a hard time sitting with what is because life is tough, then can you sit with what is and not accept it? It doesn't mean you have to accept it. But can you just sit in it and say, I don't accept it. I'm angry. And we'll get into it. But some of that is about emotions.
In Kabbalah, that's called hitbonenut, which means to discern, right? Just discerning. And I mentioned before, is it true? Right? Byron Katie and her work, if you don't know it, great work. And I use it all the time in my own life and with clients. But isn't that part of what it is you make time, then you get quiet, right? You bring yourself back to the present, and then you pay attention to the present. And is it true? And again, how much of our anxieties aren't actually true. They're based in a version of the truth.
And what ifs.
The what ifs, the what could have beens and should have beens and blah, blah, blah. Right. And this chat. And you're quieting it, you're looking at it, you're listening to it. You're saying, is that true? Right? Is it true that the lion is coming for me? Or have I just been thinking about it all night? Now I can't sleep.
Right.
And there is no lion. It's a figment of my imagination. And now I can start to process that once I realize, is it false or is it true?
I like that. And I'll take it a step further and say that part of sitting in silence and then part of being in that present moment is really understanding what you feel. And that's part of embodiment, which we'll get to. But emotions block us. Emotions are energy that block us from finding the soul. Emotions are the pathway to the soul. But often our emotions, especially when we're in anxiety, our emotions are so intense that we can't. It's like the weeds, you're trying to find the path and you can't because there's too many weeds. Those weeds are your emotions. So when you feel it, when you give yourself that present moment to sit and feel that junk, that fear, that terror, then you can find your way through it to the soul.
Yeah, and we live in a world that sometimes over celebrates emotions and says, right, but it's your feelings, so that's everything. And you should feel your feelings, and then you should go through this process of saying, is that a true experience? Do I want to feel this? Right? Do I want to carry on with the emotion of it, or do I want to bring down the emotion so I can start to respond? Because when we're in a feeling state and we haven't brought any thought to it,
Absolutely.
and paid any attention to it, it just carries us, and now it's just instinct. And I work a lot with the Enneagram. We'll be talking a lot about it, but kind of an ancient spiritual blueprint of how we're designed. There are some of us that default to thinking, some to our instincts, our gut, a reaction, and some to our feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's about knowing your reaction type and then bringing the opposite types of awareness to it, bringing thinking to your feeling. For me, I need to feel more and react less.
Right.
And so it's really just, but that's the point. And we'll wrap it up. Mindfulness is about paying attention, coming off of autopilot.
Right.
And saying, I don't want to live in reaction. I don't want to live on autopilot. I want to become conscious of what's happening. And in that consciousness, in that awareness, you start to take back the reins of your life.
Absolutely. Which takes us into the next section of Own Your Power and how to deal with your anxiety, which has so much to do. We've been talking about it. So you start in the mind and you go into your body. And it's really about it's embodying, right? So the idea of body is the first thing I think of, and some people will say, so yoga is similar to meditation. You either love it or you say, I hate it. I can't do it. I can't hold still. My body doesn't do yoga. And being a yoga instructor, along with a healer, like I have taught to every single body can do yoga. Yoga, and there are other ways, of course, but yoga is a pathway to calm the nervous system down. Why? Mostly because you're using your breath. So if you're a jogger, if you're a hardcore exerciser, which we love also, we like the combination, that's also a great way to move your breath. I mean, really exercising is breath. And so if you feel highly anxious, it is about looking at ways in which you can move your body so that you can move your nervous system into more calm.
Yeah, I've used this story before, but it's always been informative to me. When my dad died, I had a hard time crying. I was supposed to say the Kaddish, the prayer, we say for our loved ones for a year in the Jewish tradition. I'd never once cried. It made me feel nothing, but I would go jogging and I would burst into tears. I would cry. That was my morning MOUR experience. And it was an eye opener for me, a heart opener for me, because I realized that we all respond to our feelings and the emotions and the anxiety differently, and we process it differently.
I think also when you're in that deep mourning or when you're in some really deep stress and we talk about getting your emotions out. Sometimes that's easier said than done because we can feel so blocked. I remember when my mom passed away, I couldn't do yoga. I couldn't feel, there was a moment that I was so blocked up. And I just got on the floor and I curled up in a ball. And for me, that was just like when you're jogging, for me, it was this, I let it all out, the tears, but also I think it's really important to let the angst, the emotions out of your cells by getting it out verbally. So not only was I crying, but I was also speaking out loud and I was talking out loud and
screaming.
Getting the anxiety
out.
Absolutely.
I prescribed that for a client who was dealing with anger and anxiety, and it was just a lot of heady talk. And I gave her the assignment of going out to the woods and do what the Kabbalists did when we were in Israel. Yeah. When I lived in Israel by myself, the first time I lived in Sfat, the north of Israel, and getting ready for the high holidays, you would hear down in the wadi, in the riverbeds, the Hasidim, the mystics screaming, Abba, Abba, which means daddy. And they were letting out their fear, their anxiety out in the woods. Mm-hmm. And so going out into the woods or taking a pillow if you don't have woods and screaming into it.
Right.
Get it out of your body, not just think it out of your body.
I mean, it reminds me of what I do a lot in my work and the journey, which is the program that I've been certified in, is this idea of taking yourself deep into your body and noticing in your body where the feelings are. Where are you holding your emotions? And typically people say the stomach, the throat, or the chest. That's like the main areas. And if this part of your body had words, what would it say? And if it could express itself, what would those words be? And what is the emotion that's here? And it's just this process of letting your body speak. And we use it in trauma. We use it with anxiety. We use it with people who can't feel, who are completely numb and shut down to their feelings. Sometimes we call that depression. Anxiety is a little different. Anxiety is when you can't stop talking. And depression is when you there's a vault and it's shut down.
Yeah. And so, I guess what we're talking about with this embody is reverse engineering the process, meaning it started in my brain My anxiety then manifests as a hole in my stomach, an ulcer. So then maybe the pathway sometimes is to then listen to where the anxiety is in my body, pay attention to my body. You're talking about, talking to the ulcer, talking to the anxiety, let it find screaming, getting it out as a way back to calm your mind.
I think it's a cycle. And so that kind of leads us into our next Om.
So wait, Om, make time, Om, meditate on it, Om, mindful, Om, embody spirit, and Om, empower self, number 5.
Right. And so empowering yourself. So we talked about this a little bit earlier in our podcast. Empowering, when I think of anxiety, means are you going to allow anxiety to take over you? Or are you going to get aligned in your soul so that you can make choices based on your soul and feel empowered, even though you feel anxious?
And you still might feel anxious afterwards.
Yeah.
But you're driving the bus.
Of course. Right. So then you can take guided action. And so action that's not guided is powerlessness. But when you are in guided action, then you're making choices based on your highest good, which, by the way, I have to say is really hard to do. I remember in the beginning of COVID, one of our daughters, and I've spoken about this before, was in quarantine. We thought, it was so new in COVID. We thought for sure she had COVID. So we stuck her in the basement for 2 weeks, which is probably not the best idea.
We've done it a few times since, so we knew she didn't have COVID.
She still has a little PTSD over that one.
She'll come out when she's 19, 20.
So part of her didn't want to come out, the other part did. But I proceeded to have the second anxiety attack that I've had in my life. The first one was when your father died. And it was like my body just remembered what to do, unfortunately, with it. And I felt powerless because I couldn't breathe. And by the way, I really understand, what happens when you think one of your kids or if you've been diagnosed with COVID or you think your family could have it. We've also had a child who's been tested twice already in the last 2 weeks to see if he has COVID. Do you know what happens when you feel like you can't breathe? Like if you are sick and you can't breathe, or if you feel like maybe there's something that's going to happen, you lose your breath and you lose your power. And so it's interesting. I mean, just to bring COVID into it a little bit, is like COVID is the breathless disease where you can't breathe. And I think it's really this really scary but interesting invitation to awaken us to our anxiety and obviously COVID is a serious illness, but the energy of it is to breathe and to feel empowered and to feel like you're in your body to make choices for yourself.
Yeah, and this step, Om, empower yourself, is all about not being a victim. And you have to tread lightly when saying that, I get it. But I just read Edith Eger, The Choice. She's a Holocaust survivor. But then her next book, The Gift, which is a practical application of her insights. A logotherapist, as am I, we both learned it from Dr. Viktor Frankl, which is taking back your power through finding meaning, through finding your purpose. And you'll find it in anything, in every circumstance. And Dr. Frankl talks about it in the Holocaust. Nelson Mandela talks about it in prison for 25 years. They were never prisoners. They were never victims. They might have been victimized, but they were never victims. They always remained free, even if they were incarcerated. And just thinking about, what does that mean when you're facing something of such overwhelming circumstances, the dinosaur, the lion, COVID, whatever it might be? Mm-hmm. What are small ways that you can take back your power? You might still be sick with COVID. That's not up to you. Right. But how you respond to it, that's still your choice. And we always have that choice of response, and really thinking about it with anxiety, taking back our power away from this beast that we've given our power over. We feel victimized by it. We feel like a victim in it, and it doesn't help us move forward.
I think what you're saying is that there's a space in here of the gift of surrendering and letting go. Our anxiety tells us that if we control everything, if we chase the demon and we control, then we're going to have control. Then we're going to have power. And I think about my mom who died 2 years ago, and she was in the business of controlling her disease. I mean, she did a great job until the end when she realized that she had to let go and surrender. So I mean, that's it.
Yeah, and she never controlled the disease. She controlled her response.
Right.
That's all she ever could control.
Right.
It's outside of us. There's nothing you can do to stop the earth from spinning. That's a rock, swirling around a hot ball of fire in outer space. All you can control is your response to it.
Yeah. So the question is, now that we're talking about it, how do you truly let go? We want this idea of that, we don't want to be type A. We don't want to control everything. But the truth is we try, because that's what our anxiety has taught us. If you control this amount of space in your life, then you can have the desired outcome. And that's where I think about this empowerment comes from, not me, my physical body. It comes from, I'll say God, but it comes from God or your high self, your soul, that we are ultimately not always in charge. Because when I'm in charge, I make poor decisions. When I'm aligned in my soul that is connected to something deeper than myself, then I can let go.
And that's the sixth step, manifesting. You have to replace, if you ask the question, how do you let go? Here's the only way you can let go. You can only, coach of mine in baseball said, you'll never get to second base until you take your foot off of first base. Mm-hmm. And it's obvious, but I was afraid to get thrown out. And he said, focus on second base. Go towards something. And that's what manifesting is. It's not about hocus pocus, please God save me. It's about, I am going to fill the void with light. I'm going to flood it with light. I'm going to look into it and go into it and see what's possible, not just what's absent.
And what happens when you manifest that, when you go into the light, into the darkness and find those cracks of light, is that you transform. This is a scary time. There always will be scary times. But when you go into the light, into the heart of darkness and find the light and let go and let yourself be in all of it, into the shadow and find it, then you transform. I think we always talk about, we have our butterflies somewhere back there in our office, and we think about, it's on our website. There it is. We think about this transformation that the butterfly goes through. She doesn't become the butterfly. She has to go in her cocoon. It goes through a metamorphosis process
of quiet and dark and alone. And,
yeah. And then she becomes this beautiful butterfly. I think of the book that our kids read, the cocoon that's like, he eats and eats and eats, and then he goes into his cocoon.
It had those holes in the book.
Yeah, the salami and the pineapple and the watermelon.
I'm hungry. It's lunchtime. We're gonna wrap this up here.
And what does he become? He becomes, at the end of the book, a beautiful butterfly. Don't you remember?
I like your mommy voice. Yeah.
I miss that. I have teenagers.
No more
They're
mommy
nuts.
voice. It's mostly yelling.
Yeah, you should have seen me yesterday. Anyways, back to topic. You become that beautiful butterfly, right? But you have to sit in it and transform from it.
And holding the vision of the butterfly, especially when you're in the cocoon, the chrysalis, the darkness, and it's about manifesting through moving towards what you want versus running away from what you fear. And that takes us into the final making meaning, or meaning making. And it's about finding the meaning within it and using your power of choice. You want to talk a little bit?
When I think of making meaning, I feel like it's a summation of everything we talk about. Stop, become silent, feel, embody, feel your emotions. From that, you heal your wounds, you sit in the darkness of it all. And then finally, making meaning is serving. We are nothing if we don't serve. The best way that I know how to get out of my anxiety and help my clients out of anxiety is to say, how can I serve? What is my highest good today? And how can I best serve my highest, truest self? Divine feminine, God, whatever you call it. How can I get out there, take guided action from my soul space and give to somebody else who needs me? Whether it's your child, your spouse, your coworker, or the larger world. That is how you make meaning.
Yeah, Dr. Frankl calls it transcending self.
Right.
And the problem or the challenge of anxiety is that we're caught in the downward spiral, the spin cycle, right? And it's all about us, even if it's about other people, right? Anxiety is by definition mine. It isn't real. It is out in the world. It's in my head. I'm absorbed. Again, if I'm thinking about my kids and I'm anxious, it's still about me.
Right.
And so it's about breaking out of that by giving, by doing, it can be as little too as just getting up out of bed if you can't sleep, instead of laying there and spinning, and going and just journaling, get it out of you,
Right.
transcend yourself. Even with that journal, it's no longer just about you. It's about redirecting and harnessing that energy, but certainly towards causes and people beyond yourself as well.
Yeah, and I think to conclude, if you feel anxious and you feel isolated and you feel like you can't get out of bed, what is one thing that you can do to help somebody else today? You know, even if it's walking your dog needs to walk. And just getting out of your own space to give to something else other than you. Zoom, do something, go walking, do something, and seeing a friend maybe outside, but do something for somebody else.
And lastly, choosing to find meaning and purpose in it. There is a meaning, there is a purpose. It is up, not for me to tell you what it is, it's for you to discover that for yourself. But transforming this, whatever dark emotion you're going through, into a journey of self-discovery. Jung talks about that the pathway to the light is always through the shadows. The shadows, the dark emotions, anxiety, have a purpose, have their place. We encourage you to own your power by making that decision to find the meaning in whatever you're facing.
Yes. So with that, we just want to thank you for joining us today. And if you like what you heard and want to learn more, you can check out our website at www.mysoulcentered.org. And we are so excited to finally, this has been our baby for a while, bring to you Own Your Power, our 7-day complimentary program. We talked about it a lot today, but these are some of the finest tools that we have created in our lives personally and in the lives of our clients. We want to help empower you, and we want to inspire you to own your power in your midlife and beyond. So follow us on social media at My Soul Centered on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And if you enjoyed this podcast, we deeply appreciate if you would give us a 5-star review. And wherever you listen, it'll help us get our word out. That's how we serve. And please share it with someone that you think would like to hear about it. And until next time, we wish you a huge namaste and lots of peace.
And jump over to the website where you can get My Soul Centered, or I will put into the program notes a link as well. Until next time, shalom, salam, namaste. Peace.
Peace.